Hi everyone. So in this video we are going to be looking at something called chained exceptions, and this is a very important concept and it's going to be a slightly complicated program. So I hope you pay attention. So first of all, let's just go ahead and create a new file, and I'll save this as student.java, and I'm going to create a class like class student, which has an int id and a string name, and it'll have a constructor which takes the name and the id. Let's just make these private, which is how it should be. And in this we just do this dot name equals name and this dot id equals id, and we'll give this two more methods, just public int get id, and this will just return the id, and similarly I have a public string get name, and this will just return the name. So that's it for the student class. Let's go ahead and create another file, and I'll call this batch.java. So here I have a public class batch, and this will have a private student array students, and it will have a private int student count, and let's just make a constructor for this. So public batch, and for now I'll just populate this array with random values. So let's just go ahead and first do students equals new student array with, let's say, 4 entries, and these will be student 0 equals new student alpha with the student ID 1, and I'll have 3 more statements like these. This would be 2, this would be Bravo, Charlie, and Delta, and this needs to be 4, 3, and this needs to be 1, 2, 3, and let's just set the student count to 4. And let's create another method here, which is the public student get student, and this will take a student, or let's say get student index, um, and this will take a single student, and in here what I'm going to do is just do for int I equals 0, I less than student count, and I plus plus, and here I just do if students I dot get id equals student dot get id, and students I dot get name equals student dot get name. If both of these satisfy, then just return return I. Actually, let's just keep this to get student, and because the return type is student, so here I'll just return students I, and if I can't find this, I still need to return something, so I'll just return null here. So that's my batch class, and next up what we're going to do is okay, let's just first create the test class. So test.java, here I have public class test, public static void main, and within this let's just say I do a batch equals new batch, and I do a student, and let's just create another method here, public static void find student. Actually we could return a student here as well, find student, and I take a batch, and I'm going to look for a uh, student in this batch. So what I'm going to do here is just do batch dot get student and pass it the student, and I can just return this. Alright, so now let's just call this method find student, and I pass it the parameters batch and student, and let's just go ahead and try to compile this java c test.java, and I expect an error here. um, right, so um, I still expect an error here. So it says student might not have been initialized, and let's see what error I have here. I've actually misspelled students, I think. um, yeah, here it is. um, and it also gave me an error which said that student was not initialized. So what I want to do here is not create a new student, but what I'm going to do is just set this to null to avoid that error of initialization. And let's just do it now, and it has compiled successfully. Let's just do java test, and it gives me exception in thread main java.lang.null pointer exception, and it gives me the stack trace. So here's where chain exceptions come into the picture. So for example, I have this find student method. I don't want this to throw a null pointer exception. I want here a throws student not found exception, and I'll have to actually create this exception. I'll do that soon. And here I just need to do a try, and within this I keep this line there, and here I'll have to catch a null pointer exception, let's say E, because that's what the exception is going to occur here. But from here I want to throw a new student not found exception, and let's just give this a message student not found. And what I'm going to do here is just try, and right here I'll catch a student not found exception E, and I'll just do a system.out.println exception and then E, and I still need to create the student not found exception class. So let's just do that. Public class, let's just save this first, student not found exception the java, and public class student not found exception, extends exception. And like we saw last time, all I do really need to do here is create a constructor, public student not found exception, and this takes a string message, and I just need to do super message, and that's it. Let's just go ahead and try compiling this and run it. So here what I've got is exception, student not found exception, and then the message which is student not found. So this is all good, but the thing is what happened here was the underlying cause of the exception was a null pointer exception, and the reason I couldn't find the student is because the student is set to null. So what I want to do here is, although I do want to throw a student not found exception, I also need to tell main that the actual cause of the exception was something else. It was this null pointer exception E that I got. So what I need to do here is I need to create a public student not found exception, another constructor which takes a string message and also a throwable, which is the cause. The type of the cause is a throwable, and if you remember, throwable is where all the exception classes inherit from. So here again, I just need to do super message and cause, and this is all fine, but the convention is to create four constructors actually. Student not found exception, and this needs to be empty, and I just need to call super here, and I also need another constructor which just takes a cause without a message, so throwable cause, and this just calls super with the cause. So this is the convention that's followed. We have four constructors, and the exception class itself also has four constructors. So now let's see, let's also pass this E as the cause, and let's just go ahead and compile this again. I'll just clear the terminal, Java test, and look at what I have here. I have exception, student not found exception, and then it also prints java.lang.null pointer exception. That's because I passed the cause here. So these are called chained exceptions, where we put an exception inside an exception. So what that means is basically that although this exception was the one that was thrown, the cause is something different. So another example of this is, let's say you try to read a file, but because you read the file incorrectly, there's some exception there. There's an IO exception there. You actually set the divisor incorrectly, and you end up dividing by 0, and you get the actual thing that you get is an arithmetic exception. So even in that case, you may want to mention that although I've got an arithmetic exception, the actual cause is a file not found or some IO exception. So these are called chained exceptions, and I hope this cleared exception handling to a large extent. And I've also shown you how we can write different programs, how we can have various try-catch blocks. And one last thing that I want to mention is the student not found exception that we've created is a checked exception. So we won't be able to remove this. Let's say if we remove this, we are going to get an error here. Let's just try that. So it says unreported. Here it says unreported exception must be caught or declared to be thrown. And the reason we're getting this exception is because this is a checked exception, and I'm not mentioning that my find student method throws this exception. So we may sometimes want to create unchecked exceptions, and all we need to do for that is extend the runtime exception class instead of the exception class. And let's just clear this. And now it compiles correctly. And let's do Java test. It still does give us exception student not found exception and then the message. So this is a case of unchecked exceptions where I can skip mentioning that my method throws the exception. So that's the last thing that I wanted to mention. And I hope you know how to write programs and create your own exceptions after this, because it can come in real handy sometimes. So I'll see you next time.